called for the suspension of the U.S.'s participation in the Iran nuclear deal in reaction to Iran's recent ballistic missile tests. These tests were both a violation of the spirit of the nuclear deal and provocations that can no longer be ignored. One of the missiles tested had printed on it in Hebrew. Can you believe this? Israel must be exterminated. And I will instantly gather the world and lead us to reapply sanctions if Iran violates one cross T or one dot of that nuclear deal. We must put the sanctions back on them as the world community, together. Let me also tell you, no amount of money that's being made by any business will stand in the way of the need to make sure that the security of Israel is secured and that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. No amount of money can push us in the wrong direction. And I want you to be assured that in a Kasich administration, there will be no more delusional agreements with self-declared enemies. No more. And as the candidate in this race with the deepest and most far-reaching foreign policy and national security experience, ladies and gentlemen, I don't need on-the-job training. I will not have to learn about the dangers facing this country and our allies. I have lived these matters for decades. One day, and on day one in the Oval Office, I will have in place a solid team of experienced and dedicated people who will implement a long-term strategic program to assure the security and safety of this country and that of its allies, such as Israel. I will lead and make decisions, and my national security appointees will work tirelessly with Israel to counter Iran's regional aggression and sponsorship of terror. We will help to interdict weapon supplies to Hezbollah. We will defeat ISIS in Syria and Iraq. And we will assist Israel to interdict Iranian arms supplies and financial flows to Hamas. And let me stress, I will also work to build and expand on Israel's newfound regional relations as a result of the flawed Iran nuclear deal. Amazing. Israel and the Arab Gulf states are now closer than ever. The bad news here is that the U.S. is not part of this new web of relations. I will work to participate in, expand, and strengthen those ties. Israelis live in one of the world's roughest neighborhoods, and Iran is not the only threat that the U.S. and Israel both face there. ISIS, headquartered in Syria and Iraq, is a mortal peril. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, its spread must be stopped. Since it is dedicated to destruction in Israel, the Middle East, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the United States, it is a threat to all civilization. Unless we recognize and unite around this central truth, we will remain committed to an ineffective and piecemeal approach to dealing with ISIS. Because the world recognizes the existential threat posed by ISIS, I believe I can lead a regional and NATO coalition to defeat ISIS both from the air and on the ground in Syria and in Iraq. We're all in this together. I will also provide support and relief to our common ally Jordan that has shared the brunt of refugee flows, and I will bring our troops home as soon as we, together with our allies, have created a realistic prospect that regional powers can conclude a settlement guaranteeing long-term security there. I will then support allied coalitions as they destroy ISIS's various regional affiliates. My administration will cooperate with our allies to deny Libya's oil as a resource, deny Libya as a platform to mount attacks against Europe, and disband what has become a hub for acts of terror throughout Africa. I will support our common vital ally Egypt in its efforts to destroy the insurgency in Sinai and terrorists infiltrating from Libya. And I will provide the Afghan National Security Forces with the key aircraft and support needed to defeat the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, and then I will bring our troops in Afghanistan back home. Insurgent states such as Iran and networked transnational terrorist actors such as ISIS are not the only threats that Israel, the Jewish American community, and America together face. Believe me, a Kasich administration will work from the beginning to block and eliminate any form of intolerance, bigotry, racism, or anti-Semitism, whether domestic or international, particularly in international bodies. I condemn all attempts to isolate, pressure, and delegitimize the State of Israel, and I will support Congress's efforts to allow this activity both here and in the EU. And I am also very concerned about rising attacks on Israel and Jewish students on our college campuses. I pledge to use the full force of the White House to fight this scourge, and I will make sure we have the tools needed to protect students from hate speech, harassment, and intimidation while supporting free speech on our college campuses. I have been horrified by the recent spate of Palestinian attacks on Israeli citizens. These are not spontaneous actions of lone wolves. They are part of an unprecedented wave of terror that has involved over 200 attacks on Israelis since October 2015, and they are the outcome of a culture of death that the Palestinian Authority and its forebears have promoted for over 50 years. Indoctrination of hate has long been part of a planned and well-thought-out strategy. Palestinian children are raised in a culture that glorifies martyrdom and the willingness to die in the pursuit of killing or maiming Israelis. Children's textbooks have been filled with vile anti-Semitism. Families of suicide killers receive an annuity after they kill and maim. Imprisoned terrorists need stipends and receive stipends and are guaranteed jobs in the Palestinian civil service at a salary determined by the length of their sentence. Public squares, streets, and even soccer tournaments are named after terrorists. If they truly want peace with Israel, then Palestinians cannot continue to promote a culture of hatred and death. We must make it clear that we will not tolerate such behavior. And I do not believe there is any prospect for a permanent peace until the Palestinian Authority and their friends in Hamas and Hezbollah are prepared to take real steps to live in peace with Israel and recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. And this violence is unacceptable. In the meantime, we can best advance stability in the region by providing Israel our 100% support. We can make sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself with weapons, information, technology, political solidarity, and working quietly to facilitate Palestinian and Israeli efforts at reconciliation. This is what would be expected of a dependable ally. Folks, let me conclude by talking about the greatest alliances are those with countries such as Israel, where we share a community of values. The post-war international system that we and our allies build upon these common values, of course, is under challenge or attack. And that's why we have to recommit ourselves to those values. We must not shy away from proclaiming and celebrating them, and why we must revitalize our alliances to defend and expand the international system built upon those values, a system that has prevented global conflict and lifted over 2 billion people out of poverty in the last 70 years. In doing this, we cannot go it alone. We must hang together and be realistic about what we can achieve. We cannot be neutral in defending our allies either. We must be counted on to stand by and invest in our friends instead of abusing them and currying favor with our enemies. For effective governance in our democracy and for the sake of the future, we have to work together at home as well across party and ideological lines whenever and wherever possible. This is exactly what I've done in the course of my career in public service. I reached out to the other side countless times to see how we can sit together and achieve the progress that America wants and deserves. And we all look back to the time of Ronald Reagan and his meetings with Tip O'Neill, where they came together to put America first, politics and partisanship second. And Reagan, as he reached across the aisle to Tip O'Neill, very partisan, legendary, they managed to hammer out deals that gave Reagan victories in revitalizing our economy and implementing the military buildup that ended the Cold War. But it took a conscious effort and an attitude of wanting to cooperate. So, this is what I want to do, Republicans and Democrats who are here today. We need to work together with Congress on an agenda that serves the interests of the nation as a whole. We are Americans before we are Republicans or Democrats. We are Americans. And let me tell you, in regard to that, I will not take the low road to the highest office in the land. I will not do it. Yes, we will rededicate ourselves to reaching the bipartisan national security policy that President Reagan and the Democrats achieved. And you can be assured that my strategic program will include and incorporate Israel as the bedrock partner for our mutual security in the Middle East. Together, we will combat violence incited in Israel itself and, of course, its eternal capital, Jerusalem. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today in front of so many of you who've contributed so much. I'm humbled by the chance to stand here at this incredible gathering of people who so much love America and so much love our great ally, Israel. You see, we're connected together. It's about civilization. It's about peace. It's about love. It's about togetherness. It's about healing the world. The great Jewish tradition is everyone lives a life a little bigger than themselves. And that tradition has worked its way deep into my soul, where I tell people all across America, dig down deep. The Lord has made you special. Live a life bigger than yourself. Lift others, heal, provide hope, provide progress, and with that, the rest of this century and the relationship between the United States and Israel will grow stronger and stronger for the benefit and mutual security of the world. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
American support for Israel takes many forms, but none is more tangible than annual foreign aid. The United States provides annual security assistance to Israel to help the Jewish state defend against mounting threats like rockets, missiles, and terror tunnels. This aid also helps the United States. 75% of American security assistance to Israel must be spent in the U.S., creating jobs and opportunities here at home. The other 25% can be spent in Israel, supporting world-class research and development of technologies that make both countries safer. American support is a crucial component of Israel's security, and the only way to guarantee this funding is through strong, bipartisan support in Congress. That's where AIPAC comes in. By working with Democrats and Republicans in Washington, AIPAC helps ensure that America will provide support for Israel over the long haul. These efforts have been critical to making sure Congress fully funds two 10-year agreements, one in 1998 and a second in 2007. Today, your work with AIPAC is critical once again. As the United States and Israel negotiate a new deal for 2018, you will play a vital role in educating America's leaders and helping to ensure that America continues to stand with Israel. Because when Israel is safer, America is stronger.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Paul Ryan.
Wow. Gosh, all I gotta say is wow. Man, it is really nice to see you here today. You know, I want to say to Howard Core, to Bob Cohen, and to Lillian Pincus, thank you so much for inviting me here today. It is fantastic to be with you. Welcome to Washington, D.C. You know, I heard from a lot of folks today that you've heard from a lot of folks today. And it's always a good thing when America's leaders declare their support for Israel. You know what? It's not enough, though. The speeches, the statements, all the words in the world mean nothing if you do not back them up with actions. That is why, 2 years ago, when the rockets were falling on Tel Aviv, the House approved emergency support for the Iron Dome. And that is why, within just 2 months of my taking the speakership, we voted to fund every penny of our security assistance commitments. And that is why, in my first trip overseas as Speaker of the House, my first trip will be to return to Israel. And that is why I can pledge to you here tonight that as long as I am the Speaker of the House, we will not allow any legislation that divides our countries to come to the House floor for any consideration. It is action and deeds that builds trust. And our friendship is too important. The dangers we face today are too real to let there be any misgivings between us. You know, like my House colleagues, I understand that America is not safer when we back away from Israel. America is safer when we stand with Israel. So, if there's one thing that I would ask you to take away from tonight, it is this. My colleagues and I will do everything we can to strengthen our friendship, not just with words, but with concrete achievements. No taking friends for granted. No leaving them in the lurch. A friend is a priority, and American leaders should act like it. Now, that's what I think most Americans believe, on both sides of the aisle. But I do hear people raising doubts every now and then. They say things like, the Middle East is a mess. It's none of our business. Why are we involved? Why are we picking sides? They say that our alliance is not an asset, but a liability. They say that it hamstrings America, that it cuts against our interests. And in my experience, it does us no good to airily wave off our opponents or to dismiss them as narrow-minded, to be high-minded about it. That doesn't bridge the divide. That deepens the divide. Instead, we need to confront our critics' arguments head-on. Have a real conversation. And I would say to them that I firmly believe that the friendship between our two countries is not just in Israel's interest, but it is in America's interests. It is good for Israel, it is good for America, and it is good for the world. You know, to me, it's really just a lesson in history. You know, for many years, we avoided what Thomas Jefferson called entangling alliances. We were not as strong as a country back then. And the great powers, they wanted to use us for their own purposes. There was no reason to play the pawn in their chess game. So, we stayed out. Well, that all changed in World War II. We learned the hard way that even if you don't go looking for trouble, trouble has a way of finding you. You know, the day that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, we realized that two oceans could no longer protect us anymore. We'd grown too strong for our enemies to ignore us. Our interests now reached across the world, and so did the threats. We couldn't beat back Nazi panzers in North America or North Africa. We couldn't liberate the islands of the South Pacific and climb the cliffs of Normandy all on our own. We had to work with other countries who shared our objectives. We had to make sure that our allies knew we stood with them. We had to lead a global alliance. After the war was over, a new threat emerged, an aggressive and expansionist Soviet Union. The Soviets were setting up puppet regimes all across Eastern Europe. They were aiming missiles at our friends in Western Europe. They were on the march in Asia and Africa and South America. And so, we faced a choice. Either we could withdraw from the world, arm ourselves to the teeth, and make ourselves into a garrison state, or we could pursue a forward-leaning defense, create a community of free nations, keep open the lanes of commerce, build institutions that would foster cooperation. And that is exactly what we did. These were the years that we created NATO and GATT and the International Monetary Fund. And of course, in 1948, we were the first country to recognize the State of Israel just minutes after she declared her independence. The first country. Both the Cold War and the World War taught us that free countries are safer when we work with each other, when we stand by each other, when we trust each other, because then, when a threat arises, we can confront it together. Well, The threats are very different now. North Korea thumbs its nose at the world as it plays with its nuclear weapons. Iran openly backs tyrants and funds terrorist groups as it jockeys for dominance in the Middle East. And emboldened Russia is only too happy to try and reclaim its neighbors as its client states. And with the rise of ISIS, an even deadlier strain of Islamist extremism has taken hold. Once again, we face an aggressive militant ideology with an assist from a gang of rogue states. So why is our relationship with Israel so important? Because in the fight against terrorism and proliferation, our interests are one and the same. For the terrorists, Israel is the first target, and we are the ultimate target. And you know why? Do you know why this is? Because we share the same values. Israel, like us, is a liberal democracy in a sea of authoritarian regimes. So when America helps both countries become stronger. Both countries are protecting our way of life. Just remember, Israel does not fund terrorism in other countries, but it does help the New York Police Department fight terrorism in our country. Pretty profound. This is the crux of the matter. I think the current administration, I think they understand that we need our allies, but it fails to understand what our allies need. They need more than vague assurances that we've got their back. They need to see with their own eyes that the measure of our full commitment. And I don't say this to try and castigate or to blame anybody. I say this to bring clarity to the situation that we are facing. I think this is the most fundamental misunderstanding that has undermined our security. Exhibit A. Exhibit A is the Iran deal. I think it was a terrible deal. Worst in our lifetime. Not since 1939 have we seen horrible foreign policy like this Iran deal. And you know what? Because of this deal, our friends in the Middle East are losing faith in us, or at least in our judgment. Iran got billions of dollars in sanction relief, and in exchange for what? For taking apart some, not all, just some of its nuclear program? And then in 10 or 15 years, all those limits expire? In other words, they get something for essentially nothing. It was a steal. It was a steal, and that's even if they don't cheat. Look, we all wanted the negotiations to succeed, but we were supposed to get something out of it. It is fine to negotiate with our enemies. It really is. But not at our friends' expense. That doesn't make any of us any safer. And I don't think it's an accident that every few months we hear of Iran launching yet another ballistic missile. Instead of dismantling Iran's nuclear program, we legitimized it. This is a huge threat to the state of Israel. And it is a threat to our country, too. But whatever you think about the Iran deal, I want to make something really clear. Whether you opposed it or supported it, whether you are optimistic or skeptical, and I sense a few skeptics in this room here today, I want you to know it is your right to petition your government on any issue at any time. That's what AIPAC does. That's why you're here. And if anybody questions that right, I just want you to know that we stand with you. So at this point, I think we've got to do everything we can to shore up our alliance. We have to hold Iran accountable for its violations. We have to push back against Iranian aggression in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria. We have to extend our bilateral security agreement with Israel and expand it to also include missile defense. We have to help Israel continue developing the Arrow 3 and David's Sling. One more thing I worked on quite a bit when I was chair of Ways and Means and throughout my career. We have to push back with clarity, with firmness, against any attempt by any other country to boycott, divest from, or to ever sanction Israel. This is where America can lead. This is where America can make a difference. This is where your voice is and must be heard. This is what they're trying to do to us. We can and must be clear on this. And you know what this does? What all these things do is send a signal that America has no greater friend than Israel, and that we will stand by her through thick and through thin. We have a choice coming. You've got people running for president, they'll get political. But here's what we see. We have a choice coming. We're going to make a big choice in 2016. And along those lines, in the House, we're going to try and help crystallize that choice. We have several members on our task force on national security. Their goal is to design a strategy for a confident America. And at the top of that list is how do we strengthen our allegiances with our allies like Israel. To sum up our approach, I would use the words of General James Mattis. We need to take our own side in this fight. There is a side to be taken. And as we put together our agenda for the next president, we are going to need the help of AIPAC and everyone here today. But, and I can see you, we need especially the help of the young people that are here in this room. And you know why? And by the way, it's so great to see you, but you know why? Because the decisions that we're going to make
Neta is our eldest son. He's a very happy boy. He always wanted to be like everybody else.
I would say that in every step of his life, we had question marks. Throughout the way, he struggled all the time with autism, and we struggled to find the right framework that will be the best for him.
He always knew that he wants to go to the army and to do something contributing. It's very important for him to be a part of the community.
IDF is a crucial milestone to go through in order to become a real, proud Israeli. For years, the IDF was closed for people with disabilities.
רואים רחוק program is about taking the visual capabilities of people with autism and making use of these abilities to help the IDF and the intelligence. It's very important to get everybody involved in the IDF, Autistics, for me, it's very important because my son is autistic.
We started the program with the idea that people on the autistic spectrum have special visual capabilities. And there's already science research that's proved that they see different. Some of them are doing aerial photo analyst. Some of them are doing quality assurance for software. Others, information sorting.
This is not a project of charity. This is a project of excellence. Now, once I was given proof that the kids that are going through the project of Roim Rachok could function in IDF, that's the time when Ono Academic College went into this project and said, let's bring this together and make sure that Israel could be proud of them and they could be proud of Israel.
Roim Rachok program gives these young adults an horizon for the future. We simulate as much the working day in the army so they can get ready. In these 3 months, they learn the military profession as well as how to be a soldier.
I remember the first day that he was getting in his uniform in the army. We saw someone stepping there, coming towards us, and we didn't believe it's our son. He was with uniform, very proud in himself, walking like that, very tall. And this was very, very exciting moment. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
There is no difference between Roim Rachok soldiers and regular soldiers. Roim Rachok soldiers interpret satellite images and air photos to acquire relevant terrain data and deliver it to the commanders in the field. Our unit is also called the Eye of the Country. We are working day and night to secure Israel. This is the final task, to be safe.
It's a very important job because it's helpful for the IDF to see our enemies and help our troops to know the area. It's a great honor, but also great responsibility.
Once we introduced this program and people see what autistic people can do, I think it changes the way they see them, and it changes the stigma about autism.
It's win-win for the IDF, a win-win for the guy himself, and win-win for the family and us as society.
Because of this program, I am very optimistic about Neta's capability to integrate into the real life.
I'm sure now that Neta is going to be okay. He's going to be independent and to do the job he needs to do. Whatever he chooses, he will do it, and he will do it right. And he will do it good.
Ladies and gentlemen, IDF Sergeant Neta Geffen and his parents.
I've always been in love with Israel. I've always loved the pro-Israel community, but I didn't know how much it existed until recently. And it was through the proactivity of AIPAC and the pro-Israel community that I got involved. My name is Will Townsend. I am a senior, and I go to Pitzer College in Claremont, California. I went to Israel on the AIPAC Campus Allies mission, and I learned an incredible amount about the culture, the people, the historical and religious institutions of Israel. And as someone who's not Jewish, it's interesting to have a personal connection to Israel. One of the most moving moments for me in Israel was coming out of Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust memorial in Israel. For me, I didn't know too much about my family background. That was something that had always been kind of a mystery to us. We knew they fled Russia, Poland area, but we weren't too sure of it. It was something that wasn't talked about, but we knew the last name. There's a computer database where you can go and research family names, and I plugged my family name into that. When the result came back, there's too many names to be listed. And that was something that was, heartbreaking. I've surely had family members who died because of their identity. Coming back from Israel, I was way more empowered to work on my campus. Pitzer's located in the Claremont Colleges, which is a consortium of 5 liberal arts colleges that all border one another. We're really prideful about our environmentalism and our social justice. The community at Claremont was already in support of climate change action. They're already in support of gun control. But an area that we struggled to find support in seemed to be the pro-Israel movement. I was inspired to be an AIPAC activist because I needed an outlet for myself with regards to my pro-Israel support. I needed an area where I could go receive training for how to talk to people about why Israel is a strong ally of the United States, why it's a progressive cause, and AIPAC provided that for me. One of my proudest accomplishments within the pro-Israel community is helping to start CDSI, Campus Democrats for Secure Israel. These relationships that we've been forming through our Israel Club matter so much. AIPAC is really helping Campus Democrats for Secure Israel by ensuring that students across the nation are getting pro-Israel training. I'm an activist because I believe so strongly in the pro-Israel movement. I believe that Israel and its existence is fundamental to a just and safe world. I want to do something about it, and by being an activist, I'm able to accomplish a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Republican presidential candidate, Mr. Donald J. Trump.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel. I'm a newcomer to politics, but not to backing the Jewish state. In 2001, weeks after the attacks on New York City and on Washington, and frankly, the attacks on all of us, attacks that they were perpetrated by the Islamic fundamentalists, Mayor Rudy Giuliani visited Israel to show solidarity with terror victims. I sent my plane because I backed the mission for Israel 100%. In spring of 2004, at the height of the violence in the Gaza Strip, I was the Grand Marshal of the 40th Salute to Israel Parade, the largest single gathering in support of the Jewish state. It was a very dangerous time for Israel and, frankly, for anyone supporting Israel. Many people turned down this honor. I did not. I took the risk, and I'm glad I did. But I didn't come here tonight to pander to you about Israel. That's what politicians do. All talk, no action, believe me. I came here to speak to you about where I stand on the future of American relations with our strategic ally, our unbreakable friendship, and our cultural brother, the only democracy in the Middle East, the State of Israel. Thank you. My number one priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran. Thank you. Thank you. I have been in business a long time. I know deal making. And let me tell you, this deal is catastrophic for America, for Israel, and for the whole of the Middle East. The problem here is fundamental. We've rewarded the world's leading state sponsor of terror with $150 billion, and we received absolutely nothing in return. I've studied this issue in great detail, I would say actually greater by far than anybody else. Believe me. Oh, believe me. And it's a bad deal. The biggest concern with the deal is not necessarily that Iran is going to violate it, because already, as you know, it has. The bigger problem is that they can keep the terms and still get the bomb by simply running out the clock. And of course, they'll keep the billions and billions of dollars that we so stupidly and foolishly gave them. The deal doesn't even require Iran to dismantle its military nuclear capability. Yes, it places limits on its military nuclear program for only a certain number of years. But when those restrictions expire, Iran will have an industrial-sized military nuclear capability ready to go and with zero provision for delay, no matter how bad Iran's behavior is. Terrible, terrible situation that we are all placed in, and especially Israel. When I'm president, I will adopt a strategy that focuses on three things when it comes to Iran. First, we will stand up to Iran's aggressive push to destabilize and dominate the region. Iran is a very big problem and will continue to be. But if I'm not elected president, I know how to deal with trouble. And believe me, that's why I'm going to be elected president, folks. And we are leading in every poll. Remember that, please. Iran is a problem in Iraq, a problem in Syria, a problem in Lebanon, a problem in Yemen, and will be a very, very major problem for Saudi Arabia. Literally every day, Iran provides more and better weapons to support their puppet states. Hezbollah, Lebanon, received, and I'll tell you what, it has received sophisticated anti-ship weapons, anti-aircraft weapons, and GPS systems and rockets like very few people anywhere in the world, and certainly very few countries have. Now they're in Syria trying to establish another front against Israel from the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. In Gaza, Iran is supporting Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And in the West Bank, they're openly offering Palestinians $7,000 per terror attack and $30,000 for every Palestinian terrorist home that's been destroyed. A deplorable, deplorable situation. Iran is financing military forces throughout the Middle East, and it's absolutely incredible that we handed them over $150 billion to do even more toward the many horrible acts of terror. Secondly, we will totally dismantle Iran's global terror network, which is big and powerful, but not powerful like us. Iran has seeded terror groups all over the world. During the last 5 years, Iran has perpetuated terror attacks in 25 different countries on 5 continents. They've got terror cells everywhere, including in the Western Hemisphere, very close to home. Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism around the world, and we will work to dismantle that reach. Believe me, believe me. Third, at the very least, we must enforce the terms of the previous deal to hold Iran totally accountable, and we will enforce it like you've never seen a contract enforced before, folks. Believe me. Iran has already, since the deal is in place, test-fired ballistic missiles 3 times. Those ballistic missiles, with a range of 1,250 miles, were designed to intimidate not only Israel, which is only 600 miles away, but also intended to frighten Europe and someday maybe hit even the United States. And we're not going to let that happen. We're not letting it happen, and we're not letting it happen to Israel, believe me. Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to hear something really shocking? As many of the great people in this room know, painted on those missiles in both Hebrew and Farsi were the words, "Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth." You can forget that. What kind of demented minds write that in Hebrew? And here's another. You talk about twisted. Here's another twisted part. Testing these missiles does not even violate the horrible deal that we've made. The deal is silent on test missiles. But those tests do violate the United Nations Security Council resolutions. The problem is no one has done anything about it. We will, I promise we will. Thank you. Which brings me to my next point, the utter weakness and incompetence of the United Nations. The United Nations is not a friend of democracy. It's not a friend to freedom. It's not a friend even to the United States of America, where, as you know, it has its home. And it surely is not a friend to Israel. With President Obama in his final year, yay. He may be the worst thing to ever happen to Israel, believe me. Believe me. And you know it, and you know it better than anybody. So with the president in his final year, discussions have been swirling about an attempt to bring a Security Council resolution on terms of an eventual agreement between Israel and Palestine. Let me be clear. An agreement imposed by the United Nations would be a total and complete disaster. The United States must oppose this resolution and use the power of our veto, which I will use as president 100%. When people ask why, it's because that's not how you make a deal. Deals are made when parties come together. They come to a table and they negotiate. Each side must give up something. It's values. I mean, we have to do something where there's value in exchange for something that it requires. That's what a deal is. A deal is really something that when we impose it on Israel and Palestine, we bring together a group of people that come up with something that's not going to happen with the United Nations. It will only further, very importantly, it will only further delegitimize Israel. It will be a catastrophe and a disaster for Israel. It's not going to happen, folks. And further, it would reward Palestinian terrorism because every day they're stabbing Israelis and even Americans. Just last week, American Taylor Allen Force, a West Point grad, phenomenal young person who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, was murdered in the street by a knife-wielding Palestinian. You don't reward behavior like that. You cannot do it. There's only one way you treat that kind of behavior. You have to confront it. So it's not up to the United Nations to really go with a solution. It's really the parties that must negotiate a resolution themselves. They have no choice. They have to do it themselves, or it will never hold up anyway. The United States can be useful as a facilitator of negotiations, but no one should be telling Israel that it must be, and really that it must abide by some agreement made by others thousands of miles away that don't even really know what's happening to Israel, to anything in the area. It's so preposterous. We're not going to let that happen. When I'm president, believe me, I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%. You see, I know about deal making. That's what I do. I wrote The Art of the Deal. One of the best-selling all-time, and I mean seriously, I'm saying one of because I'll be criticized as if I say the, so I'm going to be very diplomatic. One of, I'll be criticized. I think it is number one, but why take a chance? One of the all-time best-selling books about deals and deal-making. To make a great deal, you need two willing participants. We know Israel is willing to deal. Israel has been trying. That's right. Israel has been trying to sit down at the negotiating table without preconditions for years. You had Camp David in 2000, where Prime Minister Barak made an incredible offer, maybe even too generous. Arafat rejected it. In 2008, Prime Minister Olmert made an equally generous offer. The Palestinian Authority rejected it also. Then John Kerry tried to come up with a framework and Abbas didn't even respond, not even to the Secretary of State of the United States of America. They didn't even respond. When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one. Thank you. And when I say something, I mean it. I mean it. I will meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately. I have known him for many years and will be able to work closely together to help bring stability and peace to Israel and to the entire region. Meanwhile, every single day, you have rampant incitement and children being taught to hate Israel and to hate the Jews. It has to stop. When you live in a society where the firefighters are the heroes, little kids want to be firefighters. When you live in a society where athletes and movie stars are the heroes, little kids want to be athletes and movie stars. In Palestinian society, the heroes are those who murder Jews. We can't let this continue. We can't let this happen any longer. You cannot achieve peace if terrorists are treated as martyrs. Glorifying terrorists is a tremendous barrier to peace. It is a horrible, horrible way to think. It's a barrier that can't be broken. That will end, and it'll end soon, believe me. In Palestinian textbooks and mosques, you've got a culture of hatred that has been fermenting there for years, and if we want to achieve peace, they've got to go out and they've got to start this educational process. They have to end education of hatred. They have to end it, and now. There is no moral equivalency. Israel does not name public squares after terrorists. Israel does not pay its children to stab random Palestinians. You see, what President Obama gets wrong about deal-making is that he constantly applies pressure to our friends and rewards our enemies. And you see that happening all the time. That pattern practiced by the president and his administration, including former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who is a total disaster, by the way. She and President Obama have treated Israel very, very badly. But it's repeated itself over and over again and has done nothing to embolden those who hate America. We saw that with releasing the $150 billion to Iran in the hope that they would magically join the world community. It didn't happen. President Obama thinks that applying pressure to Israel will force the issue, but it's precisely the opposite that happens. Already, half of the population of Palestine has been taken over by the Palestinian ISIS and Hamas, and the other half refuses to confront the first half, so it's a very difficult situation that's never going to get solved unless you have great leadership right here in the United States. We'll get it solved one way or the other. We will get it solved. But when the United States stands with Israel, the chances of peace really rise, and rises exponentially. That's what will happen when Donald Trump is president of the United States. We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. And we will send a clear signal that there is no daylight between America and our most reliable ally, the State of Israel. The Palestinians must come to the table knowing that the bond between the United States and Israel is absolutely, totally unbreakable. They must come to the table willing and able to stop the terror being committed on a daily basis against Israel. They must do that. And they must come to the table willing to accept that Israel is a Jewish state and it will forever exist as a Jewish state. I love the people in this room. I love Israel. I love Israel. I've been with Israel so long in terms of I've received some of my greatest honors from Israel. My father before me, incredible. My daughter Ivanka is about to have a beautiful Jewish baby. In fact, it could be happening right now, which would be very nice as far as I'm concerned. So I want to thank you very much. This has been a truly great honor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.